So welcome everybody, Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University. We are with the Doctorate in Organization Development and Change Symposia series, as well as the All Things Change podcast webinar series. And we are here today to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is directly related to our doctoral program, and that is thought leadership and service of professional joy. And what I mean by that is our program focuses on developing the competencies. There's 8 competencies that we focus on within the context of learning about organization development and change as people pursue their passion. And we focus on thought leadership as the way for a person to establish their professional expertise in an area they are passionate about. And the best way, which today focuses on this, the best way to help us to share what we know with the world is through the printed word. And now it's the text-based or written word in multi-forms, digital, print, and mixed media. But the more we can share, the more we can touch lives. It's the ripple effect. And I call it passive difference making, which is making a difference while we sleep. So as someone creates some content, puts it out there in the world, someone shares it with somebody else, before you know it, you're making a difference with people as they're reading and learning from the knowledge that you're sharing with others. And that's at the heart of thought leadership. And our program focused on transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential, focused on what that person is passionate about is key, because that's what's necessary for us to advance our thought leadership. And thought leadership gives us the opportunities to do more of what we love, where we want, when we want, with whom we want, making the living we want. And that's the key. So today is all about that. We have wonderful guests here. They'll introduce themselves. You all have read about them in the advertisements and the marketing that's gone out. We have, and in this order, we'll have ODJ, Organization Development Journal, with Joanne sharing some of her thoughts first. And then David Jamieson and Lisa Meyer will share a little bit about ODR, Organization Development Review. And then we'll round it out with David Bright, who will talk about JABS, Journal of Applied Behavioral Science. There's the focus for our course. We have a course in our program in which in the first semester, the students work on a paper that they're passionate about, develop a conceptual paper, and submit it to one of the 3, ODJ, ODR, or JABS Practitioner Corner. And we've had a good bit of success, and we're learning as we go. I think this is all about figuring out how to find ways to unlock our students and everybody. And we have a lot of people that are here who care about sharing what they know and wanting to make a difference that matters. So without further ado, we'll jump in. We'll hear a little bit from each of our journals and their editors, and then we'll have a small group discussion where you will be able to talk about what you heard, your reactions, what questions you have, and then we'll come back and have a deeper dive and with a Q&A on the things that everybody wants to know about. So Joanne is kind enough to go first. And so Joanne, why don't I turn it over to you?
Hi, I'm so glad to see everybody from around the world. Thank you for coming. This is really important. Everybody learns something every day, and especially in our field, it's really important to let other people know what you've learned. So adding to the literature in any way, in any part of the literature, is important for all of you. So I'm glad that your program is encouraging you. And what I'm going to say, just to start with, is persistence is the thing that will get you published. You're not going to like the reviews. I get really angry every time I get a review. I mean, I just go, how could they say that? But honestly, those reviews help me to write better papers. So persistence is it. The Organization Development Journal is a scholar practitioner journal and has been around since the early 80s. Basically, we are eclectic and we take all different types of papers and try to have them mixed throughout the quarterly journal that we have. So if you have research, if you have a theory piece, if you have a case study, if you have action research or an opinion piece, We are interested, as long as you talk about change and how change affects the group that you're working with. We also find that it's very important for our readers for you to tell them how to use your information, whether it's for academics or whether it's for people who practice in the field, managers, other OD consultants, whatever. That part of the discussion is really important for our readership. I think one of the best things to do for any journal is to read the journal. And you have access to ISODC for free as a student, and Steve can make sure that you have access to our journal. So it is important for you to realize that writing for a journal is different from writing for a course. Now, there are rules. What you want to do is get the author's guidelines for any journal and use them like a syllabus requirement for a class. Check off every one of the things that that editor is asking you to do. So if it says we expect APA 7, make sure that you do the very best APA 7 that you can do. We want in the ODJ the writing to be certainly scholarly, but if you have every other word jargon and it is not readable, unless you're in your particular part of the OD field, then that's not going to help anybody. So what I suggest you do is when you're finished working your paper and feel good about it, before you actually submit it, give it to a bright person who you respect, who is not in the field, and let them read that paper. And if they can understand what you're trying to say, then that will make it. Okay, so then you have explained your jargon, you're not over jargoning the paper, but you are communicating to somebody who you respect who is not in the field. Keep in mind that the ODJ wants original work, and that means you've got to be careful about your papers. Do not put them on a website that is public. That is considered publishing. If you are taking information from yourself in another paper, then cite yourself in that paper. One of the mistakes I'm seeing a lot of is that people are not citing their work in other publications. And yes, it's important to cite yourself. So it's not only important to cite other people's ideas, but rework your own. And those ideas that have already been put on a website that's considered published or has been published, you need to cite that too, because you, if it's published, no longer own that paper. It is copyrighted by the journal that you've submitted it to. When you send papers to me, which is the way it is done in the ODJ, I look for content being appropriate, I look for application, and I look for the author's guidelines. Basically, what I want you to do is consider what you want your impact to be in the area that you want. If you want to be a practitioner, then consider practitioner scholar journals or scholar practitioner journals. If you want to be an academic, consider the academic journals as the way to go. You want to build your reputation, and by publishing, you do. All of my work internationally has been a direct result of the ideas that I've published in the field. So all I can end with is be persistent. You will get published. Thank you.
That's great.
And we have David and Lisa. David from
Yep.
ODR. So David, you want to?
Yeah. Thank you, Joanne. You reminded me of a number of things that I hated when they happened, but that was good.
Yeah,
that was
right.
good though, Joanne. I like that. Anyway, and you know, but both of our journals have been friendly with each other for a long time, and I think you see a lot of different things across our ODJ and our ODR. But let me tell you a few things. ODR started as the OD practitioner in the 1960s, and it was started by the OD network. And in those days, excuse me, it was like a 4-page, then a 6-page, then an 8-page newsletter. It was not a journal, and it had this ugly sort of yellowish paper for some reason, because we still have them in our archives. But what was fascinating about it is everybody whose name you know and read today, all were people who were writing in that OD practitioner in the 60s and the 70s. And a lot of our original thinking in the OD field started there. And so I'm always impressed running back through some of the archives occasionally. And we will occasionally pull stuff from the archives and include it in some of our issues. But about 3 years ago, the editor at the time was John Vogelsang, and a number of the review board were sort of thinking two things, that we have been leaving out the academic people sometimes, and that the title OD practitioner may not be sort of a broad enough scope. So after, you know, months of processing things, they came up with the OD review. And one thing I would say is the early writing tended to be very practice focused. And that is still a very important element of how we want our journal to be. But what really moved it to the scholar practitioner level is that we want people to write, and we also want people to practice not with evidence-based knowledge or with knowledge from the literature, so that we are building on things that already exist and not writing a piece and not knowing what I'm missing or what I'm not connecting to. So the way we think about scholar practitioner is, in some cases, we want the scholarship side to support what you're saying. In other ways, we want what you're learning in practice to be connected back to concepts and research that has been previously done. It looks and feels completely different than reading academic articles. We're not looking for volume. It's not how many citations you have and all that, but it's weaving the scholar side alongside of the practice side. We also have we have 2 different review processes, and you pick that. It's in the submission guidelines. You pick that when you're sending it in. One we call an open development review, and the second one is called a double-blind review. And the reason we created both of those is there are some people at some universities that won't get any credit for publishing something that wasn't double-blind reviewed. But we always do peer review. Both versions of this are peer reviews. The open development one is intended to have reviewers provide feedback to the author, and usually even have contact with the author to help them take it from whatever their submission was and move it closer and closer to a publishable article. So you get the developmental piece built into it. The blind review goes to 2 people with no knowledge of your name, and you get no knowledge of their name. and they write up their reviews, and then it gets collected by an associate editor and sent back to you. And that becomes the second review process. So again, when we changed the name and we wanted to make sure that we can accept academic authors and scholar practitioner articles, we have the two choices. Everything we publish, however, we want it to have clear practice implications, whether it's a research study or whether it's a case study or whether it's new conceptual thinking. There's got to be some connection to what does this mean for the people who practice in this field. Some of the things that we encourage is we encourage some research-based articles. Some people do some studies. Sometimes if it's a great big study and it's very sophisticated, they may actually want it published in a different journal, a journal that will get it even a wider outreach, for example. But we've had some very good smaller studies that we've published, and so that's one thing that we can do. The second thing I would say is new conceptual thinking. So you read all this stuff, you study all this stuff, you work in the field for 10 or 15 years. The question is, what are you learning from it all? And what would you begin to say differently about some of the conceptual thinking we need? Learning from experiences. There's a lot of good articles that are built off of particular kinds of experiences. Some do it as a case study, and some don't do it as a single case study. They do it as a collection of experiences and now write about it so that other people could learn something from it. And then the other one I would say is things that might advance the field, meaning when we are in a field that needs to keep changing, and I think we've been hit hard by a significant environmental shift, and it's time to look at how is OD going to adapt. So I think articles that have to do with some new advances and some new thinking would be helpful to us. Our guidelines, they will be revised again this year before the year's over, and I'll explain why in a second. But they're on the OD Network website under the section for the OD review. It always has our submission guidelines there. We also publish it 2 times or more a year in some of our issues. And our journal goes to all members of OD Network. That's the way you get the journal. We also have subscriptions to the OD review, and we are getting some subscriptions from around the world because a lot of other countries don't really have an OD focused journal, except for ODJ, in my opinion. That gets around the globe pretty well. And we're in the process. The reason we're going to be rewriting the submission guidelines is we're about to launch a new submission process, which is automated the way many journals have. So people will be submitting it through a portal that'll be on the website, and things will now be, and now all the issues and everything will be on there. People can buy issues from there. All of the articles will now be indexed, and they didn't used to be. And so we have to put some different instructions in the submissions, and we hope that will be up by the end of this year and start us off with next year pretty well. But so those are the things about the ODR, and I know what Lisa, our associate editor, does a lot of the great new thinking and takes us in new directions, and I'm sure she'll be talking about some of those pieces next.
Thanks for that, Dave. That's good. I'm going to share my screen. I have some things this will help me stay on track with my thoughts and stay on time. So this session was called Propelling Your Thought Leadership, Secrets to Getting Your Experience Published. And I ran across this animation and I thought, oh, this is just way too cheesy to not use.
That's nice.
Because I actually thought I could also make a point with it, and that's that thought leadership is not about posting memes on LinkedIn. Thank you. We can move on from there. This idea of secrets of getting your expertise published, I had to think about that for a minute because do I know any secrets to getting my expertise published? And in reality, what I've kind of figured out, if my screen would advance. Oh, this is interesting. Let me try this. Oh, there we go. There is no backdoor. There are no shortcuts, no codes to crack, and no hacks is what I've decided. We've already talked about that. The process of peer review publishing can be really messy and frustrating and discouraging sometimes. And that's not a secret, as we've already brought that out. So I thought it might be helpful to for me to talk about this messy process a little bit, address it from the standpoint of the author, and talk about some things that might be helpful to you to think about in the process. So instead of calling this secrets to getting your expertise published, I'm calling it dirty little secrets to getting your expertise published, because these are some of the things that are not so pleasant to talk about, but eventually they're things that everybody discovers in the process of going through peer review publishing. And the first one is something that Joanne touched on, and that's that your final product will look nothing like your first draft. And so maybe we should talk about first drafts for a minute. First of all, the reviewers should not be asked to waste their time on first drafts. That's not what they're there for. Your first draft is like a data dump. It's a pile of stuff that needs to be sorted out and organized and edited and revised and challenged, all of this. Reviewers will notice and they will appreciate your attention to this. If they think they're looking at a first draft, they will send it back and say, no, thank you. So what does this mean? It means that you, as you work to your final product, you'll find out that you don't need to throw in every idea you have. You don't need to throw in every citation you found and every reference you have. You need to study the guidelines for the journal, as it's already been stated, and frame your topic for the reader in a compelling way that matches what the readership of that journal is. And then be clear about what you want to say. And none of this happens in first drafts. As a point of reference for my writing, personally, my first drafts are sometimes at least a third longer than the final product, maybe even twice as long. There's just a lot of extraneous stuff that's in your first draft that doesn't need to be, that won't show up in your final product, and your final product will be better for it. So the second dirty little secret that I had to talk about was that your biggest obstacle might be your own self-doubt. As Dave and Joanna both talked about, we're really looking for yourself in this as scholar practitioners to bring something, not just what you found out about the field as you have progressed through your doctoral studies, but how that relates to you. And you may think that your biggest obstacle is some lack of time, too many priorities, but if really, these may just be excuses that actually they can be reality, but they may be excuses for this idea that that they're just covering up for this self-doubt. And that shows up in forms like, I don't know enough, or I haven't read enough, or I don't have enough experience, that sort of thing. And I think you should know that everybody goes through this. It's a mindset that's tough to break out of. It's hard to envision how you stack up against, the sages of OD, the ones that Dave talked about, that have been writing for a long time. But at the OD review, as Dave talked about, we value your perspective. Everybody brings their own unique worldview into this field of OD, and we can all learn from each other's experiences. If you think you have something to say about some aspect of OD that relates to a problem that you've encountered, you're probably right. You need to figure out what that is and how to talk about it. And for those of you, I just want to recognize here that I know some of you, for some of you, English is not your first language. And I want to recognize that your challenges are even steeper in this way. But we want to stress that your perspective is very valuable and needs to be heard. These are important ways that the field develops. So this addressing your own self-doubt is, it shows up in ways, well, let me talk about this appreciating your perspective. Dave touched on this already, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but this is actually some criteria that we've laid out for our reviewers that talks about presenting, combining and integrating ideas beyond the current understanding and application of research and knowledge, and looking for novel ideas for how the field can adapt, addressing the future needs of organizations in the world. That's what those are the sorts of things that we love to read about in the OD review. So everybody's perspective is valued. This leads me to the third dirty little secret. Writing for publication is full of traps. And the crazy thing about this one is that it's kind of related to number two. Oftentimes you're going to find yourself in a writing trap because you're overcompensating for some aspect of self-doubt. And it shows up in things like, well, I think Joanne already talked about this, overwriting, saying too much, strings of disconnected citations, too much jargon, overly abstract nouns, overly complicated paragraphs, and something I just call third person goofiness, where people try to, talk in a kind of a non-human way about, I think it's a throwback to when scientific researchers were supposed to be neutral observers of, and that's not a OD scholar practitioner. We are down there in the mess with everybody else. So we are not neutral observers. So I picked up this example about that from a book called Stylish Academic Writing by Helen Sword. And it's a great book to have to use as a kind of a reference to go to kind of get you out of these traps sometimes, because she offers these great examples. And this one is one from literary studies. It's not an OD paper, but I won't read it to you because you can see for yourself. It's just full of abstract nouns and complicated adjectives and run-on sentences. And I have $100 bill here for anybody that can tell me what that says. But
it's hard to read. That is hard to read, man.
No. So the nice part is that in pulling apart these paragraphs and these examples that she has, she actually wrote a brilliant, beautiful sentence that actually says what this overly complicated sentence is trying to say. And that's that Vernon Lee's writing deserves scholarly attention because she applied scientific thinking to her literary endeavors in original and interesting ways.
Wow.
And I think that's a beautiful sentence. And I would challenge all of you to try to write beautiful sentences like that. So I recommend just kind of, if you have a chance, taking a look at Stylish Academic Writing by Helen Sword. So that's really, I love talking about this stuff, and I can talk about my writing practice all day, but there are no secrets, just like Joanne said. It's just practice, practice, practice. And I've been told by some people that I'm a good writer, and which is very flattering, and I'm always appreciative, but I'm pretty sure that there really is an appreciation for the work that I put into it, because I put a lot of work into my writing, because it's the best way and really the only way to navigate this, as I said, messy, imprecise system of peer review publishing. It just is what it is. And as Joanne said, you just got to work it and work it and work it. Reviewers can only do so much. That was a big point I tried to emphasize on this. They are there to help you take what is already a good piece and take it to the next level. They're not expected to be proofreaders. They're not expected to be grammar cops. Don't ask them to do it. That part's on you, authors. Writing is well, like thought leadership, I guess. It's a journey, and a lifelong journey. So, a thought leader isn't someone who just has good thoughts. It's someone who can express their ideas clearly. It's someone who presents arguments in a compelling manner. It's someone who communicates well. So how do you get to this place? Well, it's like the old, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So again, I think in the breakout, I'd love to talk about my writing practice a little bit or answer questions about this, but I thought this might be a good way to kick off kind of some thoughts that you might have that might be helpful to you in the publishing practice. And I'm going to stop that, but we won't go there. We will go to stop sharing.
Thank you, Lisa.
I think goes to David Bright now. Hi,
Yeah.
David.
Hi, David.
All right, I better unmute so you can hear me. I'm actually really glad to have a chance to go last because it's helped me to gather my thoughts on what might be helpful. I think I'll start with a little story of when I was new to the publishing game 20 years ago as a doctoral student. I put my heart and soul into writing an article for a special issue of a journal. I can't remember what the journal was, but I sent it in. I was very excited about it. Got the reviews back, and one of the most helpful reviews I've ever received started out with something like this. I was very excited to read this article, but as I read this paper, it did not fit any logical template with which I am familiar. And when I read those words, first of all, I could have been very discouraging, but what I cued to was logical template. And it was the first time I'd ever thought or seen those two words together, logical template. And while my paper was soundly rejected for good reasons, I really cued to those two words, logical template. What I have learned in the intervening years, and that actually sent me on a journey to try and understand what it means to follow or develop a logical template. Every article that you write that will be successful have some sort of template to it, and every journal tends to have a certain every journal has an audience that it caters to, and that audience is looking for certain rhetorical markers or rhetorical devices that are just common and understood within that community. And so from that perspective, I think one of the most important things you can do to be successful is to spend time in that journal. And that was mentioned earlier by one of the other presenters. Go into the journal and read it and try and discern what are the logical templates that are common for that journal. And it actually can be helpful if you go back and dust off your philosophy 101 just to understand what it means to develop a logical argument that's coherent, that leads to conclusions that can be justified if all your premises are correct. I mean, that really helps. What I suggest is kind of a common practice for me when I'm interested in writing for a particular journal. I will go in and find at least a handful of articles that have been published that are aligned, at least in structure, to what I think I might want to do for that journal. And then I'll kind of figure out what map the logical template that they're using. And it doesn't mean I have to follow the logic or that model precisely, but at least it gives me some frame of reference for understanding what a successful article is going to look like in that forum. So I'm, I guess, representing the Journal of Applied Behavioral Science, which is a more academic journal. We talked here about going to the journal and finding out about its, what its aims are and so forth. I thought it might be helpful, rather than my just talking about that, to actually go to the website for the Journal of Applied Behavioral Science, so you can kind of see what that actually looks like in practice. So if you go to any journal website, you'll see this is the home page. It's typical to have, recent articles and so forth, but from an author perspective, what you want to look for is information like what you see on the right here. So you'll have the journal description, which is going to tell you just some basic information about it. Here, the Journal of Applied Behavioral Science brings to scholars and professionals the latest theory and research on processes and techniques of change in groups, organizations, larger systems, academic practitioner collaborations. Pay attention to the mission of the journal. You will want to write articles that fit the mission of the journal. You can understand more about how they translate that mission into practice by looking at the aims and the scope. This will tell you the kinds of audiences that the journal serves. That'll give you clues about the rhetorical standards that would make your article attractive. And it also gives you some sense of how to make your work fit, or to what degree your work might fit. It can be helpful to look at the editorial board and find out a little bit about the background of those who are running the journal, but probably most important, as mentioned before, look at the submission guidelines. And I love what, I think it was Joanne that said, to look at this as your syllabus. And she's absolutely right. Here we have the style guide, how to write, so these are technical requirements that you need to make sure you're addressing. And it'll have, policies and so forth. So you want to look at those details in very carefully. And you can find those details for any journal. So just go to the website and do your homework to find out, what the requirements are and what's going to make for a successful article. And then as far as when I, from a reviewer's perspective, when I receive an article, I'm an associate editor, which means I'm kind of the decision maker for the journal. I'm kind of new to that role. But from a reviewer's perspective, when I'm trying to make sense of an article, I really do pay attention to how well that article is constructed. So there are both technical aspects of writing that need to be done with some skill, and there are also then the conceptual questions. So if your technical work is not done well, it's very difficult to get to the conceptual value of the article. So just some technical things that you need to pay attention to is having a good hook at the beginning of your article that helps us understand exactly what it is you're trying to say and the value that this manuscript or this article is going to bring to the world. It's amazing to me how many articles I review where it's very hard to discern what the central question is that the author is trying to address. And quite frankly, if you can't clearly articulate what the question is you're trying to address, the likelihood of you being successful is very low because we won't know what it is you're trying to do with the article. And then having a logical consistency. So that's where we get back to the idea of having some logical structure that pulls all the pieces together. So if you're writing an empirical article where you're trying to bring data to answer your question, it's important to include in your logic model why you selected the methodology that you're using and how that methodology was used to answer the questions in a way that makes sense. If you're writing a conceptual article, how the pieces build on one another is very important, and so forth. So having a logical consistency to the article makes is very important. And then from a conceptual perspective, we want to evaluate the significance of the ideas, how the ideas advance our knowledge, and then for our domain, the connections between research, scholarship, and practice are very important. So those would be the things that I would cue to look at the value that the article could potentially bring. So I think that I just end by just saying something about JABS specifically. It does tend to be a scholarly, it's more scholarly, but it aims to sit right at that nexus between research and practice. So we welcome a variety of different types of writing, everything from empirical articles to conceptual or articles that propose new models or frameworks. We have a practitioner corner, and we're always looking for good thought pieces that can fit in that space. And then look for special issues. I've found great success in my publishing experience writing for special issues where the editors for the special issue, they are specifically looking for articles that align with the topic. And so if you have something that aligns with that topic, you're already more likely to catch the favor of those who are making decisions, because they're looking for pieces that align with a specific area of focus. So I would encourage you to kind of look for those opportunities as well. And I think I will stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and all of you. What we're going to do is we're going to have a lightning round, small group discussion to formulate a question to bring back. We're going to take about 3 minutes to do that. I'm going to open up the room, say hi, and get a question, and you'll bring it back in 3 minutes. And I'll leave you with this that David prompted me on. Country music is 3 chords and a story. Life is a logical template. There's always a pattern to anything that we create. And if we choose to go off on our own, that's fine. But you just have to develop a logical template that others will then follow later. But for starting out as a writer, I think it's important to follow the logical template, and the students are doing that in this class. So I think that's a really good piece. So I'm going to open up the rooms. I'm going to invite everybody, including our authors, to go. It's just 3 minutes. Go say hi, formulate a question, bring it back, and we're going to wrap up with some Q&A. There we go.